Doyen stood at the edge of the Grand Council chamber, watching aliens from dozens of worlds argue about things that seemed far more important than him. He had been on the Convergence station for 3 months now, and every day felt the same. Nobody took him seriously. Nobody took any human seriously. The station was massive, floating in space around a quiet moon. It was built for diplomacy, a place where different species could meet and talk without fighting. At least that was the idea. In reality, it was a place where the strong species made decisions and the weak ones stayed quiet. Humanity was definitely in the weak category. They had only joined the Galactic Assembly 5 years ago, and most aliens acted like humans were children who had wandered into an adult conversation. Some were polite about it. Most were not. Doyen was 22 years old, fresh from a diplomatic training program on Earth. He had been so excited when they selected him for this assignment. He thought he would help build bridges between humanity and the galaxy. Instead, he spent most of his time organizing files and running errands for people who barely remembered his name. Today was worse than usual. Ambassador Tejan, the head of the human delegation, was giving a speech about peaceful solutions to border disputes in the Outer Rim. It was a good speech, carefully prepared. Doyen had helped edit it himself. The chamber erupted in laughter before Tejan finished his first paragraph. A Vraxian delegate stood up. He was huge, covered in crystalline scales that caught the light. His name was Counselor Vrex, and he hated humans. Everyone knew it. He did not even try to hide it. "Peaceful solutions," Vrex said, his voice dripping with mockery. "Of course the humans suggest peace. They are too soft to suggest anything else. Your species knows nothing of real conflict. You are prey animals playing at civilization." More laughter. The Korath delegates, insectoid creatures with clicking mandibles, made sounds that Doyen had learned meant amusement. The Helians, bird-like warriors with bright feathers, ruffled themselves dismissively. Even species that claimed to be friendly to humanity seemed to find the whole thing funny. Ambassador Tejan finished his speech with dignity, but Doyen could see the shame in his eyes. This was not the first time. It would not be the last. After the session ended, Doyen needed to clear his head. He walked through the station's commerce district, past vendors selling strange foods and weapons he did not recognize. Aliens of every shape and size moved through the crowds. Some had scales, some had fur, some had smooth skin in colors humans had no names for. Everywhere he went, conversation stopped when he passed. Eyes followed him. Not curious eyes. Contemptuous eyes. Eyes that said he did not belong here. Doyen took a shortcut through the lower corridors near the docking bays. These passages were dimly lit and mostly empty. He liked them because he could walk without being stared at. He was wrong about them being empty today. 5 young Vraxians stepped out from a side passage, blocking his path. They were smaller than Counselor Vrex, but still much larger than Doyen. Their scales were darker, marking them as younger warriors. The one in front wore marks that identified him as someone important. "Human," the leader said. His voice was thick with contempt. "You walk our corridors like you have a right to be here." Doyen stopped. His heart was beating fast, but he kept his voice steady. "These are public corridors. All species have the right to use them." The Vraxian stepped closer. "My name is Krek. My uncle is Counselor Vrex. He says humans are an insult to the Assembly. I agree. You are weak, fragile. You should kneel and apologize for your species' presumption." The other Vraxians formed a circle around Doyen. They were not just threatening him. They were testing him, waiting to see if he would break. Doyen knew he should walk away. He knew he should apologize and leave. That was what Hedgen, his mentor, always told him to do. Keep your head down. Do not make waves. Accept humanity's place, but something in him refused. "No," Doyen said quietly. "I will not kneel. Respect must be earned by all species, not demanded through intimidation." For a moment, the Vraxians looked genuinely surprised. Then Krek's surprise turned to anger. He moved fast, shoving Doyen against the corridor wall. Sharp claws pressed against Doyen's throat. Not hard enough to cut, but the threat was clear. "You dare refuse?" Krek hissed. "I could kill you right now. Who would care? Who would even notice one dead human?" Doyen could not breathe properly with the claws at his throat, but he met Krek's eyes. He would not look away. If he was going to die here, he would die with dignity. Then everything changed. A shadow fell over the corridor. It was massive, blocking out the dim light. The temperature seemed to drop. The Vraxians froze, their eyes going wide with something Doyen had never seen in them before. Fear. Krek released Doyen and backed away. All 5 Vraxians stepped back, their aggressive postures melting into something closer to submission. A figure emerged from the darkness. It walked on 2 legs like a human, but there was nothing human about it. It stood 8 feet tall, covered in obsidian black armor that looked like it grew from its body. It had 4 arms, each ending in claws that could tear through steel. Its eyes glowed amber in the dim light, and they saw everything. Doyun recognized the species from his training. Morvath, the apex predators of the galaxy. The most feared warriors in known space. They worked as bounty hunters, assassins, elite mercenaries. A single Morvath could clear a battlefield. They were respected and feared by everyone. Even Counselor Vrex treated Morvath with caution. This particular Morvath had a reputation. Doyen did not know his name, but everyone on the station knew about him. They called him the Blade of the Void. He had never failed a contract. He had hunted war criminals, pirate lords, and things worse than either. His legend was spoken in whispers. The Morvath approached silently. Each step was deliberate, predatory. Krek tried to speak, tried to explain, but the words died in his throat. The hunter stopped directly in front of Doyen. Those amber eyes studied him with an intensity that made Doyen feel transparent. The corridor was absolutely silent. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen. Doyen expected the Morvath to ignore him, or maybe to dismiss him as beneath notice. That was what made sense. Humans were new, weak, irrelevant. A Morvath had no reason to care about them. The Morvath placed one massive clawed hand over his chest. It was a gesture Doyen recognized from his cultural studies. In Morvath culture, it was a sign of deep respect. It was used between warriors who had earned each other's trust. Between brothers in arms. When the Morvath spoke, his voice was deep and resonant. It carried absolute sincerity, brother. The single word hung in the air like thunder. The Vraxian stared in complete disbelief. Krek's mouth opened and closed without sound. In Morvath culture, calling someone brother was the highest possible honor. It was reserved for those who had proven themselves through courage, skill, or shared hardship. It was never given lightly, never given without meaning. The Morvath turned to face the Vraxians. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet, but it carried more threat than any shout could have. Leave. Now. The Vraxians scattered. They ran like prey fleeing a predator, their earlier confidence completely shattered. Krek did not even look back. Doyen stood against the wall, trying to process what had just happened. His mind felt frozen. Nothing made sense. A Morvath had just called him brother. Him. A random human diplomat who had done nothing remarkable in his entire life. The Morvath looked at him again. Those amber eyes seemed to carry layers of meaning that Doyen could not understand. Then the hunter nodded once. A gesture that felt significant in ways Doyen could not explain. Without another word, the Morvath turned and disappeared into the shadows as silently as he had arrived. One moment he was there. The next moment he was gone, like he had never existed at all. Doyen was left alone in the corridor. His heart was pounding so hard it hurt. His hands were shaking. He slid down the wall and sat on the floor trying to breathe normally. What just happened? Why would a Morvath call him brother? What did it mean? He had no answers, only questions. By the time Doyen made it back to the human delegation quarters, word had already spread. Station gossip moved faster than light-speed communication. Everyone knew. A Morvath had acknowledged a human as his brother. The Blade of the Void had shown respect to one of the weakest species in the assembly. His communication device was flooded with messages. Questions demande, accusation. Everyone wanted to know what happened. What did the human do? What deal did they make? What was humanity hiding? Doyen ignored them all. He went to his quarters, a small room with a viewport that looked out at the stars. He stood there for hours watching ships come and go from the station, trying to understand. Somewhere on this station was a being who called him brother. And Doyen had absolutely no idea why. The next morning, Doyen learned that everything had changed overnight. When he walked through the commerce district on his way to work, aliens actually stepped aside to let him pass. Some watched him with calculating eyes. Others whispered urgently into their communication devices. It was not respect exactly. It was something closer to fear mixed with curiosity. They did not know what to make of him anymore. Ambassador Tajin summoned Doyen to his office the moment he arrived. The ambassador was pacing behind his desk, his face tight with anxiety and anger. "What did you do?" Tajin demanded before Doyen could even sit down. "What deal did you make?" "Who did you talk to?" "Nothing," Doyen said honestly. "I was walking back to quarters. Some Vraxians confronted me. The Morvath appeared and called me brother. That is everything that happened." "That is not everything." Tajin slammed his hand on the desk. "Morvath do not make mistakes. They do not show favor randomly. Every species on this station now thinks humanity has some secret alliance, some hidden power. You have made us a target." Doyen sat in silence while the ambassador continued his tirade. He understood Tajin's fear. The man had spent years carefully managing humanity's image, trying to make them seem harmless and cooperative. Now that careful work was threatened by something neither of them understood. When Tajin finally dismissed him, Doyen found Hijin waiting in the corridor. His mentor was a woman in her 40s who had been working diplomatic channels for 15 years. She had seen everything the galaxy could throw at humanity. Nothing surprised her anymore, until now. "Walk with me," Hijin said quietly. She led him to a private conference room and sealed the door behind them. "Multiple species have filed formal inquiries with the Assembly," she explained. "They want transparency about humanity's relationship with the Morvath. Councillor Vrex is using this to push his agenda. He claims humans are secretly militarizing." Doyen shook his head. "There is no relationship. I never met that Morvath before yesterday. I have no idea why he called me brother." "It does not matter what the truth is," Hijin said tiredly. "What matters is perception. My advice, apologize publicly. Say it was a misunderstanding. Let this blow over." "Apologize for what?" "For being called brother. Apologize for existing," Hijin said bluntly. "That is what we always do. It is how we survive here." Later that day, Doyen met with Jiwon in the observation deck. The security officer sat beside him, arms crossed, looking out at the stars. "Everyone is telling you to apologize and hide, right?" Jiwon said. She did not wait for an answer. "Typical. Humanity always apologizing for existing in this galaxy." Jiwon had a different perspective. She believed humanity needed to stop acting weak. "For once we have leverage. They fear a Morvath connection. Let them fear. Let them wonder. Why should we always be the ones bowing and scraping?" Doyen understood her frustration, but deception did not sit right with him. He did not want to build anything on lies. Still, her words made him think. Maybe understanding why the Morvath called him brother was important. Maybe it was the key to changing everything. He went to find Mirai in the intelligence division. The young analyst was surrounded by holographic displays showing data about Morvath culture, history, and behavior. "I started researching the moment I heard," Mirai said, gesturing at the floating information. "The Morvath are incredibly selective. Their entire culture is built around strength and survival. They only respect those who prove themselves." She showed him historical records. The Morvath had only acknowledged 3 other species as brothers in their entire recorded history. Each time came after those species proved themselves in combat, or survived impossible situations. The honor was never casual, never meaningless. "There must be something about humanity that resonates with their values," Mirai concluded, "but I cannot find any direct connection. No shared battles, no historical contact before we joined the Assembly. It is a complete mystery." 3 days after the corridor incident, Doyen received a message on his personal device. No sender identification, just coordinates and a time. He knew he should ignore it. Hijin would tell him to ignore it. Ambassador Tajin would order him to ignore it. He went anyway. The coordinates led to a maintenance level deep in the station's lower decks. These areas were rarely used, poorly lit, and mostly forgotten. Doyen waited in the designated bay, second-guessing his decision. Then the Morvath emerged from the shadows. Up close, he was even more imposing. 8 feet of predatory power moving with surprising grace. Those amber eyes studied Doyen with what might have been curiosity. "You do not know why I called you brother." It was a statement, not a question. "No," Doyen admitted. "I do not understand." The Morvath made a sound that might have been approval. "Honesty. That is rare among the species here. My name is Kyle," Kyle began to explain. His voice was deep and measured, each word carrying weight. My people have walked this galaxy for thousands of years. We have seen species rise and fall. We recognize certain qualities not in words or politics, but in essence. He described something he called survival forged. It meant species that endured not through power or technology, but through adaptation and refusal to surrender even when outmatched. When I observed you in that corridor, Kale continued, I saw what others miss. You faced enemies stronger than you. In a place where you have no power, you could have been harmed or killed. You refused to kneel, not from stupidity or pride, but because you believed in something greater than fear. The Morvath moved closer. That is what my people were once. Before we became what we are now, we were prey. We survived ice worlds and creatures that hunted us in darkness. We learned to fight not because we were strong, but because we refused to die. I see that same essence in humanity. Doyen felt something shift in his understanding. You studied us? I study everything, Kale replied. I learned about Earth, not your technology or your wars. Your survival story. Your species survived ice ages without natural protection. You crossed oceans in wooden vessels, not knowing what lay beyond. You built civilizations despite predators, diseases, and disasters that should have destroyed you. When your own kind fought wars that could have ended everything, you did not extinct yourselves. You learned. The words reframed everything Doyen thought he knew. Other species mocked humans for being weak, primitive, and unremarkable. But Kale saw something different. He saw strength in adaptation and persistence. The other species fear what they do not understand, Kale warned. Your people's rapid rise concerns them. You went from primitive technology to faster-than-light travel in less than a century. You went from first contact to assembly membership in 20 years. That terrifies species who took thousands of years to achieve the same. Kyle explained that humanity was at a critical point. Either they would be crushed by species like the Vraxians, or they would prove themselves worthy of their place. I called you brother because I believe your species deserves to survive, Kale said. But belief is not enough. You must show the galaxy what I see. You must become the proof. Before leaving, Kale offered something unexpected. If you wish to understand why I called you brother, you must understand my people's ways. I can teach you, not to make you a warrior, but to help you recognize the strength your species already possesses. Training. With a Morvath, it would be dangerous. It would validate all the rumors. It would make Doyen an even bigger target, but it would also give him answers and tools to help humanity. I need to think about it, Doyen said. Kale made that sound of approval again. Good. A warrior who rushes into commitment is a fool, but do not think for too long. Events are already in motion that will force your hand. With that warning, Kale vanished into the shadows, leaving Doyen alone with a decision that could change everything. That night, Doyen could not sleep. He kept thinking about what Kale said, about humanity being survival forged, about proving their worth, about the strength they already had but did not recognize. He thought about Ambassador Tajin's fear and Heejin's cynicism. He thought about Jiwan's frustration and Mirai's curiosity. Everyone had opinions about what humanity should do, how they should act, who they should be. But maybe the answer was not about becoming something different. Maybe it was about recognizing what they already were. 2 days later, after barely sleeping and thinking constantly, Doyen made his decision. He contacted Kale through the secure channel the Morvath had provided. I accept your offer, Doyen said simply. Teach me. They met in an abandoned cargo hold deep in the station's industrial section. The space was massive and echoing with high ceilings and empty floor. Nobody came here anymore. It was perfect for privacy. Kyle arrived exactly on time. He carried no weapons, but somehow that made him seem more dangerous, not less. His forearms moved with fluid precision, and those amber eyes missed nothing. Before we begin, Kale said, understand what this is not. I will not teach you to fight like a Morvath. That would be impossible and pointless. I will teach you to recognize and use what makes you human. The first lesson was humbling. Kale demonstrated the physical difference between their species. He moved faster than Doyen could track. He struck training targets with enough force to dent metal. His reflexes were supernatural. This is what I am, Kyle said simply. Now show me what you are. Over the next 2 weeks, they met regularly in that cargo hold. Kyle pushed Doyen not to be stronger or faster, but to understand his natural advantages. Your species has unmatched endurance, Kyle explained during one session. Most predators sprint. Humans persist. On Earth, your ancestors ran prey to exhaustion over days. No other species in this galaxy can maintain effort like humans can. They practiced endurance exercises. Kale could overpower Doyen instantly, but he showed how humans could maintain effort long after other species tired. In extended conflicts, stamina defeats strength. Another session focused on adaptability. Kale presented constantly changing scenarios, forcing Doyen to improvise solutions. Most species have specialized evolution, Kale noted. Fraxians are strong. Helians fly. Karath work in hives. Humans can do everything moderately well. That makes you unpredictable. The most important lesson came during a meditation exercise. Kale taught Doyen about contextual awareness, humanity's ability to read environments, predict patterns, and imagine hypothetical scenarios. Your species plans multiple steps ahead, Kyle said, not through calculation like machines, but through intuition. You imagine possibilities that have not happened yet. That is a weapon more powerful than claws. While Doyen trained in secret, politics continued in the station's council chambers. Counselor Vrex, humiliated by Kale's defense of a human, was planning something. Everyone could feel it. Mireille caught wind of it first. She came to Doyen with intelligence reports showing that Vrex was orchestrating a trade dispute designed to trap humanity in an impossible situation. No matter what choice humans made, they would look incompetent or untrustworthy. The assembly session is in 3 days, Mireille warned. Vrex will spring his trap then. Doyen brought the problem to Kale during their next training session. The Morvath's response surprised him. This is not a crisis, Kyle said. This is an opportunity. Vrex thinks he set a trap, but he revealed his weakness. Fear. He fears what humanity represents. Use that fear. Kale explained a hunting principle. The prey that runs reveals its path. The prey that stops and turns forces the predator to recalculate. Stop running from their expectations. Face them with something unexpected. But what could humanity offer that would be unexpected? Doyen struggled with that question. Traditional diplomacy would not work. The galaxy did not respect human diplomacy. They saw it as weakness. 2 days before the assembly session, everything changed. An emergency signal reached the convergence station. It came from Jara Station, a civilian mining outpost in the asteroid belt. 3,000 beings lived there from multiple species, miners and their families. The message was brief and terrifying. Life support systems were failing. A cascade failure in the reactor. Backup systems could maintain atmosphere for maybe 48 hours. They needed immediate evacuation or repair. The assembly held an emergency session. Delegates argued about logistics. Jara was 6 hours away through a dangerous asteroid field. Their evacuation ships were damaged. Someone needed to go there, assess the damage, and either repair it or coordinate rescue. Multiple species offered ships. Nobody offered people. The asteroid field was dangerous. The station might explode. It was high risk with little reward. For hours they debated while time ran out. Doyen watched from the human delegation corner, feeling the familiar frustration. Thousands of lives were at stake, but nobody would act because the risk was too high. He remembered Kale's words. Stop running. Turn and face them with something unexpected. Before he could overthink it, Doyen stood up. The chamber noticed immediately. A human speaking out of turn was a major breach of protocol. Even Ambassador Tajin looked shocked. I will go, Doyen announced. His voice was steady despite every eye in the chamber focusing on him. On behalf of humanity, I volunteer to lead the rescue mission to Jara Station. The chamber erupted. Some aliens laughed. Others looked stunned. Counselor Vrex's voice cut through the noise. A human? Your species has no experience with such operations. You would die in the asteroid field before reaching Jara. Doyen met Vrex's gaze without flinching. Perhaps. But while everyone debates risks, people are dying. I am willing to try. If anyone else wants to volunteer, I welcome the company. If not, I go alone. The declaration shifted something in the chamber. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Jiwan stood from the security section. I will go with him, she said firmly. Someone needs to keep the diplomat alive. Mireille rose next, her voice quiet but determined. I trained in emergency systems repair. I can help with the reactor. A Korath engineer named Tixlar clicked forward. My species has experience with such reactors. If the humans are brave enough to try, I will join them. Then Kale emerged from where he had been observing in the shadows. His amber eyes seemed to glow with something that might have been pride. I will pilot the ship, the Morvath said. Nobody navigates asteroid fields better than my people. The chamber went completely silent. The most feared hunter in the galaxy had just volunteered to help humans on what many considered a suicide mission. Counselor Vrex looked like he had swallowed poison. The assembly could not object now, not with a Morvath committed. They approved the mission within minutes. 2 hours later, the team assembled in the docking bay. Kale had secured a fast transport with reinforced shielding, necessary for the asteroid field. Ambassador Tajin pulled Doyun aside before departure. His expression was conflicted. If you succeed, you prove something important. If you fail, at least humanity tried. It was not exactly encouragement, but it was honest. Yejin appeared at the last moment, pressing a data chip into Doyun's hand. Emergency protocols. Just in case. Her eyes were worried, but also hopeful. For once, she seemed to believe that hiding was not the answer. The ship launched. As they pulled away from Convergence Station, Doyun watched through the viewport. Somewhere on that station, thousands of beings were watching, waiting to see if humans could do the impossible. The journey to Jara was terrifying. Kale piloted with impossible precision, weaving through the asteroid field at speeds that made Jiwon grip her seat. His 4 arms worked in perfect coordination. His enhanced vision tracked trajectories that instruments struggled to map. Your species built machines to do this, Kale remarked during a close call. Morvath trust instinct. Both work when you trust them completely. Doyun monitored communications. Jara Station's transmissions were getting weaker. Their power was failing. The administrator reported they had consolidated everyone into the central ring to conserve atmosphere. Time remaining, 36 hours. Mireille worked with Tixlar reviewing reactor schematics. The system was old but reliable, unless you had a cascade failure. Then it became a bomb. They would need to physically access the core, bypassing safety systems designed to prevent exactly what they were planning. After 4 tense hours, Jara Station appeared. A wheel-shaped structure spinning slowly, its lights flickering. Damage was visible where an asteroid had struck. Kale docked perfectly, matching the station's rotation. As the airlock sealed, a Helian named Commander Sival met them. His feathers were ruffled with stress, but his voice was steady. I will not lie, Sival said. The reactor is worse than we reported. We did not want to cause panic. 3 cooling systems are offline. The core is heating up. If we cannot restore cooling in 12 hours, we evacuate. Except our ships are too damaged to transport everyone safely. And if we cannot restore cooling and cannot evacuate? Doyun asked. Sival's answer was blunt. The reactor goes critical. The explosion destroys the station and creates a debris field that makes this asteroid belt impassable for a decade. The team descended to engineering. Most levels were depressurized to contain radiation. They worked in environment suits following Sival through dark corridors lit only by emergency lights. The reactor room was enormous, humming with barely contained power. Warning lights painted everything red. Temperature readings climbed steadily. Tixlar examined the damage. The circulation pumps are broken. 3 of 4 destroyed. The 4th is failing. We need to repair them or create an alternative cooling system. Mireille studied the schematics. The pumps are physically destroyed. We have no replacement parts, but she highlighted the water reclamation system. What if we reroute the station's water system? It is not designed for this, but water is water. Enough flow might cool the core. Tixlar clicked thoughtfully. Unconventional, risky. The water system lacks shielding. Anyone working near connections would be exposed to radiation. But yes, it could work. They had a plan. Dangerous, improvised, and exactly the kind of creative solution Kale said was humanity's strength. Now they just had to make it work before time ran out. The work began immediately. There was no time for careful planning or safety protocols. Every minute that passed brought the reactor closer to critical failure. Jiwon led a team to manually reconfigure the water system control nodes. It was physical work that required strength. The valves were heavy, designed for maintenance machines, not people. But Jiwon was strong and stubborn. She refused to quit. Mireille and Tixlar worked on rewiring the flow control systems. They had to make the water system handle pressures it was never designed for. It meant jury-rigging connections, bypassing safety features, and hoping nothing exploded in their faces. Doyun coordinated between teams and monitored radiation levels. The readings were climbing in the reactor room. not immediately deadly but dangerous. Every minute of exposure increased the risk. Kale stayed in the control room, watching the core temperature and ready to evacuate everyone if necessary. He observed the humans working with obvious interest. This plan would not occur to most species, Kale commented over the comm system. They would see damaged pumps and conclude the mission is impossible. Humans see damaged pumps and imagine new solutions. The work was exhausting and dangerous. It required constant improvisation. Jiwan discovered several valves were corroded shut. She had to cut them open with a torch, working carefully to avoid damaging the pipes. Mirai and Tixlar dealt with 3 equipment failures, finding workarounds using parts scavenged from non-essential systems. Commander Sival and his engineering team helped where they could, but they had never attempted anything like this. They followed the humans' lead, adapting to their unconventional approach. 6 hours into the repairs, disaster struck. Mirai was connecting the final bypass circuit when a power surge caused a feedback loop. Sparks exploded from the control panel. The blast threw her backward. Her suit's alarm screamed. The left arm seal was compromised. In the reactor room, radiation levels were already elevated. A compromised suit meant direct exposure. Doyen rushed to her side, applying emergency sealant. But the damage was done. She had been exposed, though nobody knew how badly yet. Finish the connection. Mirai gasped through pain. I did not come this far to quit now. Doyen and Tixlar worked together to complete what Mirai started. The Korath's smaller appendages handled the delicate wiring. Doyen held components in place. It was improvised teamwork between 2 species working in ways neither was trained for. Connection complete, Tixlar announced finally. Activating flow now. Water flooded through the improvised cooling system. For a tense minute, nothing happened. The core temperature continued climbing. Doyen held his breath, watching the displays. Then, slowly, the temperature began to drop. The warning lights shifted from red to amber. The reactor stabilized. In the control room, Commander Sival watched in disbelief. It is working. By the ancestors, it is actually working. Kale's voice came through the comm, addressing Doyen directly. The core will remain stable. Your team saved 3,000 lives today. Well done, brother. But the victory was incomplete. Medical scans showed Mirai had received a significant radiation dose. Not immediately lethal, but serious. She needed treatment that Jara could not provide. They had to get her back to Convergence Station quickly. The return flight was faster. Kale pushed the engines beyond recommended limits. Mirai lay in the medical bay, weak but conscious. Jiwan sat with her, holding her hand. Doyen made his way to the cockpit, watching Kale navigate. The Morvath was completely focused on piloting. Then, without looking away from the viewport, he spoke. Your species has a saying, actions speak louder than words. Today you showed the galaxy what humans are. Not through politics or posturing, but through sacrifice and creativity. That is why I called you brother. Doyen thought about that. Will it be enough? Will they respect us now? Kale's amber eyes finally shifted to meet his. Some will. Some never will. Respect from everyone is impossible. But respect from those who matter? That you have earned. During the return journey, news spread through the galaxy. Commander Sival sent a detailed report praising the rescue team. He specifically highlighted how human creativity and Morvath skill combined to achieve the impossible. By the time they docked at Convergence Station, a crowd had gathered, not to mock but to witness. Medical teams rushed Mirai away for treatment. Commander Sival, who made the journey separately, stood before the assembly and publicly thanked the rescue team. The humans did not just save my station, Sival declared to the full assembly. They demonstrated qualities many species have forgotten. Courage without certainty of success. Creativity in the face of impossible odds. I formally withdraw any Helian support for proposals questioning humanity's membership. They have proven their worth. Councillor Vreck sat in stony silence. His political trap had been neutralized by events he never anticipated. Doyen realized Kale was right. By facing the challenge instead of running from it, humanity changed everything. The assembly session that Vrex had planned to use against humanity became something else entirely. Instead of debating humanity's weaknesses, they discussed the Jara rescue. Multiple species expressed interest in joint operations with human teams. The Kurath Collective sent a formal message. Tixlar had shared detailed accounts of working with humans. The hive mind, which previously viewed humanity as irrelevant, wanted to establish engineering partnerships. Even species that had been neutral started showing interest. The rescue demonstrated something they could not ignore. Humans might be physically weak and technologically inferior, but they brought something valuable: the ability to think differently, to adapt, to persist when others gave up. 3 days after returning, Mirai was released from medical. The radiation treatment was successful, though doctors warned she would need monitoring. Despite this, she returned to work immediately. Sitting idle would have driven her crazy. Doyen visited her in the intelligence division. She was already buried in data analysis, looking healthier than he expected. "Planning your next dramatic rescue?" she joked. "I hope not," Doyen replied. One was enough for a lifetime. They both knew it was not true. If another crisis emerged, they would step forward again. That was what the experience taught them about themselves and humanity. Ambassador Tejan, to his credit, capitalized on the momentum. He proposed joint initiatives: disaster response teams, engineering exchanges, cultural programs. Species that would have laughed at these suggestions before now considered them seriously. Tejan pulled Doyen aside after one successful negotiation. "I was wrong," she admitted. "I told you to keep your head down, to accept humanity's place, but you showed there was another way. Not through aggression or submission, but through proving our value. Thank you for not listening to me." Not everyone was pleased with humanity's rising status. Counselor Vrex, seeing his influence waning, made one final move. He called for a formal assembly hearing, demanding investigation of the human-Morvath relationship. He argued that Kale's assistance proved humans had secret military alliances violating assembly regulations. The hearing was scheduled. Doyen would be summoned to testify. Ambassador Tejan was nervous. Despite humanity's improved standing, a formal investigation could still cause damage. "Be careful what you say," Tejan warned. "Vrex is desperate. That makes him dangerous." The night before the hearing, Doyen met with Kale in their usual training space. The Morvath was unusually quiet, contemplative. "Tomorrow they will ask questions about us," Kyle said. "About why I called you brother. About why I helped at Jara." "What should I tell them?" Doyen asked. "The truth," Kale replied simply. "That is all you need. The truth is more powerful than any lie or political maneuver. Will you testify?" Kale's amber eyes gleamed. "Yes. I have things to say that the assembly needs to hear." The next morning, Doyen entered the Grand Council chamber for what would be one of the most important moments of his life. The chamber was packed. Every species wanted to witness this hearing. The outcome would define humanity's place in the galaxy for years to come. Counselor Vrex sat in his usual position, confident and ready. He had prepared for this moment. He thought he had the perfect trap. But what Vrex did not understand was that sometimes the best defense is simple truth. And sometimes, the most feared warrior in the galaxy has something to say that nobody expects. The hearing began with Counselor Vrex presenting his case. He was polished and practiced, painting the Jara rescue as evidence of human manipulation. He claimed humans had secret agreements with the Morvath, that they were deceiving the assembly about their true capabilities and intentions. "This body must investigate," Vrex declared. "We must understand what humanity is hiding, what agreements they have made in darkness, what threat they pose to galactic stability." Several species murmured agreement. Despite the Jara success, old suspicions died hard. Change was frightening, especially rapid change. Humanity had gone from primitive to spacefaring in barely a century. That speed unsettled many. Then Vrex demanded that Kale testify. Let the Morvath explain his relationship with humanity. Let him reveal what deals were made. To everyone's surprise, Kale had already arrived. He entered the chamber, and even here, surrounded by powerful beings from across the galaxy, his presence commanded absolute attention. The Morvath moved to the testimony platform. Vrex wasted no time. "Hunter Kale, explain your relationship with the human Doyen. What agreement exists between your species and humanity?" Kale's response was measured. Each word carried the weight of absolute truth. "There is no agreement, no alliance, no contract. I recognized in one human what my people value most, the refusal to surrender when facing overwhelming odds. I called him brother because he earned that recognition through his actions, not through negotiation." Vrex pressed forward. But you assisted humans at Jara. That goes beyond personal recognition. That is an act of alliance. I assisted beings who were trying to save lives, Kale corrected. If a Vraxian had led that mission with the same courage and purpose, I would have helped them too. The fact that it was humans matters only because they were willing to act when others debated. Kyle turned away from Vrex, addressing the full assembly. His voice rose, filling the chamber. You want to know why I called a human brother? I will tell you. My people remember what it is to be prey. Before we became hunters, we were hunted. We survived not because we were strong. We were weak. We survived because we refused to accept extinction. We adapted. We persisted. We learned. When I look at humans, I see that same quality. You mock them for being physically weak, yet they crossed oceans in wooden boats. You dismiss their technology as primitive, yet they went from atmospheric flight to faster-than-light travel in 1 century. You question their courage, yet a young diplomat stood before warriors who could kill him and refused to kneel. Kale's eyes settled on Vrex. You fear humans because they remind you of an uncomfortable truth. Power is not inherent. It is earned. It can be lost. Your species achieved strength through evolution. Humans achieved it through will. Which is more impressive? The chamber was silent. Even Vrex had no immediate response. The assembly chair called Doyen to testify next. He approached the platform, aware that thousands of beings across the galaxy were watching. He had prepared no speech. He would rely on honesty. I cannot speak for all humanity, Doyen began. I can only share my experience. When I arrived at this station, I believed that if humans worked hard enough, we would earn respect. I learned that respect does not work that way. You cannot negotiate for it. You can only demonstrate it through actions. Kyle called me brother not because of some secret deal. He recognized something in us. Something we share with his people. The ability to face impossible odds without certainty of success. The willingness to help others even when it offers no advantage. The capacity to adapt and persist. He looked directly at Vrex. You want to know if humans are worthy of assembly membership? Ask the 3,000 beings on Jara Station. Ask Commander Sival. Ask anyone who needs help and finds themselves running out of options. Humans will show up. We will try. We might fail, but we will never stop trying. That is what brotherhood means. Not political alliance. Not military treaty. Just the recognition that some values transcend species. Those who share those values deserve respect, regardless of how recently they joined this community. The assembly deliberated for hours. When they reconvened, the chair made the announcement. This body finds no evidence of improper alliance between humanity and the Morvath. Furthermore, recent actions by human representatives demonstrate commitment to assembly values. Humanity's provisional membership is elevated to full membership, with all associated rights and responsibilities. The chamber erupted. Some species applauded. Others sat in stunned silence. Counselor Vrex did not stay for the full session. He left the chamber in defeat, his political gambit having backfired completely. That evening, Doyen found Kale in their usual meeting place, the abandoned cargo hold where training had begun. The Morvath was examining a star chart, planning his next contract. I never properly thanked you, Doyen said, for everything. The recognition, the training, the testimony. You changed humanity's trajectory. Kale dismissed the gratitude with a gesture. I simply spoke truth. You changed humanity's trajectory. I merely witnessed it. They stood together in comfortable silence. Two beings from vastly different species who found common ground and shared values. Will you continue training? Kyle asked eventually. Doyen nodded. If you are willing to teach. Always. Brother. The word carried even more weight now than it did that first time in the corridor. In the weeks following the assembly decision, life on Convergence Station changed. Humans walked the corridors without constant mockery. Respect was not universal, but it existed. That was progress. Doyen was promoted to full diplomatic status. His role now matched the influence he had gained. Hijin became his supervisor, and together they built relationships that seemed impossible months ago. Juwan led the formation of a multi-species emergency response team. Volunteers came from across the assembly. Human members brought creativity and persistence. Their alien colleagues brought specialized skills. Together they became formidable. Mireille returned to full duty and intelligence. Her experience at Jara gave her unique insights into interspecies cooperation. She began writing protocols for human-alien joint operations, work that attracted attention from multiple committees. Even Councillor Vrex, though diminished politically, did not disappear. He remained in the assembly watching. Doyen suspected they had not seen the last of opposition, but now humanity faced it from strength rather than desperation. 6 months after that first encounter in the corridor, Doyen was invited to speak at a youth assembly on Earth. Young people preparing for careers in diplomacy or science wanted to know how humanity went from mockery to respect so quickly. Standing before thousands of eager faces, Doyen shared the story. The mockery, the fear, the moment Kale called him brother, and everything that followed. We did not win respect by being perfect, he told them. We won it by being authentic, by refusing to pretend to be something we are not, by recognizing that our strengths are just as valuable as physical power or advanced technology. Kyle saw in humanity what we sometimes fail to see in ourselves, that we are survivors, that we do not give up, that when faced with impossible situations we act. Those qualities made us who we are on Earth, and they define us among the stars. The speech was broadcast throughout human colonies and beyond. Similar themes appeared in speeches by other diplomats and mission statements in educational programs. Humanity was redefining itself, not as newcomers trying to catch up, but as a species with unique value to contribute. 1 year after the initial encounter, Doyen walked through the Commerce District on a routine errand. He passed the exact corridor where Krek and the Vraxians had confronted him. A group of young Helians recognized him. They approached respectfully, asking for a moment of his time. They had questions about human problem-solving, about creative thinking, about the approach that saved Jara Station. As Doyen talked with them, sharing insights and encouraging their curiosity, he noticed Kale watching from across the corridor. The Morvath offered a subtle nod, acknowledgement between brothers. Later they met in their training space. The sessions had evolved beyond combat into philosophical discussions about leadership, species interaction, and the nature of strength. How does it feel? Kyle asked. To have achieved what you sought? Doyen considered the question. Humbling. A year ago I wanted humanity to be accepted. Now I understand that acceptance without respect is hollow. We earned respect by being true to who we are. That is more valuable than any political status. Wisdom, Kale rumbled approvingly. You are learning. But remember, respect once earned must be maintained. The galaxy will test humanity again, perhaps many times. We will be ready, Doyen responded with confidence. Not because we are perfect, but because we never stop trying to be better. They stood together in that empty cargo hold, looking out through a viewport at the stars. Two beings from different worlds, united by values that transcended biology or culture. The story of the young human diplomat and the fearsome Morvath hunter became legend throughout the galaxy. It was told in countless variations, some accurate, many embellished, but the core message remained consistent. Strength comes in many forms. Respect cannot be demanded, only earned. And sometimes the bonds between vastly different beings can be stronger than any political alliance. Years later, historians would point to many factors explaining humanity's rise in galactic standing. Technology, diplomacy, strategic alliances. But those who were present at Convergence Station during that pivotal year knew the truth. Everything changed when one young human refused to kneel, and the galaxy's fiercest hunter called him brother.